Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, inspired by the idea of helping businesses to communicate and collaborate to get things done, Paul McCarthy from Snapfix now has his sights set on the lucrative US market. Paul, we'll be discussing Snapfix, but prior to starting the business in 2019, in what direction had your career taken you?
Well, Carl, I'm absolutely delighted to be here on the show today. I studied computer science in University College Cork about 1,000 years ago, and my career went quite international. I spent 10 years in New York, a couple of years in London. I was in Germany for a while, Mexico City, and in Sydney for a year. So I was traveling around quite a bit, working on very, very interesting IT projects and business solution projects for customers, for example, Sony Music, Citibank, Aramark, and the like.
So provide us with an insight into the type of projects that you were working at.
Very often they were quite large customer relationship management type projects, where you would have a large team of people working to a requirement specification, developing the software from the start all the way through to rolling it out and training the end users in these corporations. The lesson learned from that whole experience is that a lot of those systems were complex. They were poorly designed, if I can be truthful about it. And that's the reason I decided to dedicate Snapfix to simplicity and have a real obsession around users being able to use something very, very simple.
So before we get into the detail of that, talk to us about Snapfix, what it is and what you do.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, my background is in computer software development. In parallel with that, I've always been involved in managing buildings, both residential and commercial, as part of a family business. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I was looking to the market. I was getting very, very frustrated with information being all over the place, and voicemails and post-it notes, text messages, phone calls, WhatsApps. The information was all over the place, from tenants to myself to the various contractors. The common denominator I spotted was the WhatsApp type application. Photos and messaging were taking over the way people were communicating, and WhatsApp is a wonderful tool. It's wonderful for chat, but it's not fit for purpose for task management, for getting things done. So I set about on a mission to use all of the principles of simplicity that we love in a WhatsApp type solution, and create a task management platform with the same level of simplicity. And I identified, it was actually with my family, believe it or not, I identified the traffic light as the universal symbol of teamwork. So in Snapfix today, if you spot an issue in a building or in a hotel or whatever, it's classified as red. When it's in progress and being sorted out, it's yellow. And when it's completed, it's green. And everybody kind of understands that. And one of the missions is for people to be able to communicate super effectively using photos, and to be able to collaborate super effectively using traffic lights.
Talk to me about the solution that Snapfix is actually providing to its clients.
We have architected and designed a system that can be used for any type of task management. But to kind of start out, we focused on the maintenance of buildings. All infrastructure and all equipment in the world needs continual maintenance. So we started out with that use case. That, for example, if you have a whole team of people in a building, for example, and they have Snapfix on their phone, when anybody sees an issue at any point in time, 24 hours a day, all they have to do is simply take a photo. That's it. The photo then within Snapfix is instantly communicated to the maintenance and management team, and they can prioritize it and progress it to completion. So we're firm believers that every click counts, and simplicity is super important. So very often our customers would start with maintenance, for example, and then they would say, "Can we use this for fire safety checks?" And as you may know, hotels in Ireland today must do 3 firewalks every single day, where they check the fire doors and the various fire extinguishers and fire equipment and emergency lights and that. And using a very, very simple system to allow them to record and verifiably record that they're physically walking the floor is another great use case for Snapfix. For customers then that use it for security walks, COVID cleaning, and of course then managing valuable equipment, anything from assets within the building to vehicles.
Now, you set the business up really months before COVID started, and in the meantime you've acquired some global names as clients, including Hilton, Marriott and DHL. So what was your approach in getting these big brands on board?
Yeah, prior to September 2019, where we kind of officially launched, I had created a prototype and literally was just driving around or flying around, meeting whatever customers I could get in front of. We were very, very fortunate to kind of hit the ground running in September 2019 then, and attracted just by direct contact with general managers or operations managers or maintenance managers within those hotels, and they really liked it because they all shared the same common story. They had tried other systems, they had tried complex systems, and typically when I use the word complex systems, I mean forms, and nobody likes filling out forms. Whether it's for taxes or insurance, health insurance or whatever, we do not like filling out forms. But people, they nearly enjoy taking photographs, and we were successful in getting into the Hilton and the Marriott. Then COVID hit. Okay, so March 2020, COVID hit, and that kind of really impacted hospitality. So we went wide then in the market, both globally and sectorally. So we had designed the system for all types of buildings. So then we started talking to the likes of DHL and various companies internationally as well.
So going forward then, what is your focus from an industry perspective? You started in the hospitality sector, you're now working with logistics companies. So what does the future hold in that regard?
It was important for us during COVID to prove that not only would people around the world use Snapfix, but they would also pay for it. So we now have customers on 4 continents. We're going to double down now for the next year and 2 years, focusing on the US, and our beachhead into the US will be Florida. Ireland has 837 hotels. Florida has in excess of 4,000 hotels. So it's a great first state for us to enter that market. We will still be marketing internationally. Snapfix has been downloaded in 109 countries so far, but we're going to focus our efforts on the US, focus on Florida, focus on hotels, and at the same time market to the wider facilities management and buildings and property market across the US.
And Paul, I know it's still early days, but the key to any successful subscription-based model is retention of clients. So what are your retention levels and how much focus do you give to this particular metric?
We put an enormous amount of focus onto retention, and we like to say that the entire team is in customer success. In the software as a service subscription business, retention is absolutely key. Our churn with our customers is less than 10%, which is very, very good. And our stickiness ratio, which means people are actually using it daily, weekly, monthly, is very, very high. Offering overwhelming value to customers is really important to that. Listening to those customers and reacting to their requests in a timely manner is very, very important as well. We do have some parameters around requests that come in from customers, and they're primarily that we have to design the simplest version in the world of that feature, and it has to be universal. So we do hear many, many requests for many, many different features, but for us it's not about overloading it and making it complex through adding 1,000 features. It's about picking that one thing that will make a great impact on all of our customers.
And of course, innovation is key to the sustainability of any software business. So what plans have you got in your roadmap in that regard?
Simplicity has been baked into the business from day one. I did a lot of research with how Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive, went through their design processes in Apple, and we want to continually focus on simplicity, and simplicity is definitely the hardest job I've ever worked on. It's really, really hard because you have to mentally and ruthlessly eliminate everything that's not absolutely critical. The example I sometimes give is we all use Microsoft Word, but we pay for 100% Microsoft Word and we use 1% of it. Well, at Snapfix, we want to focus on that 1% of what's really important for people to communicate and collaborate. And sometimes people just want to share a photo and move something from red to green, done. It's that level of simplicity. Our future then will include emerging technologies such as voice control, touching your phone on a particular piece of equipment and it'll record an action on that. The use of QR codes so that you can interact with Snapfix without having the Snapfix app. So we also want people to be able to avail of our technology without having an app or without having access to a website. It should be a very, very open way of communicating and collaborating.
We're starting to hear lots about Web 3.0 and, of course, Facebook's latest announcement about the development of the metaverse. Lots about virtual and augmented reality and those emerging technologies. Is that going to have any impact on Snapfix?
Absolutely. That will be a huge part of our future. The whole virtual reality and augmented reality will be a big part of all of our futures. We're as human beings, we're extremely visual and we're extremely interactive. So using those technologies is just going to enhance how we all work and collaborate together as teams. You could be wearing a headset and communicating with a senior engineer in Germany who's literally, you're both looking at the same piece of equipment as if you were physically next to each other. And we'll be driving on those solutions hugely in the future.
And Snapfix recently completed a €1.75 million funding round. So how will this funding be used to grow the business?
There are two areas where we'll be focusing that spend. One will be targeting the US in particular, so a big effort around sales and marketing. Over the last 2 years now, we've built the platform and now we need to tell the world about it and particularly the US. So getting the word out on social media, on LinkedIn and on Google, and really getting the word out, and also attending some really high-profile trade shows. As in parallel to all of that, we'll be continuously improving the platform, again with a focus around simplicity.
And Paul, in relation to your growth within the US market that's planned and a specific focus to those thousands of hotels in Florida, are you going to be putting a direct sales team on the ground in the US to realise that growth? Or are you going to be operating through distributors?
It'll be a combination. It'll be a combination of both of those. We're in conversation with some distributors and partners at the moment, and we've also got a search on for some boots on the ground staff there as well. We're going to take a kind of an engineering approach to it. We're going to make sure that we understand the market first, understand that the pain and the problems that we're solving are exactly the ones that we're solving here, and then we'll grow the team from that. We do have enormous ambition for Snapfix. There's a huge market in the US across all of the infrastructure, and of course you'll have been reading in the news recently about some buildings failing or some bridges failing. So there's an enormous investment happening in the US over the next 10, 20, 30 years to upgrade and maintain all of those buildings and infrastructure. So there's a huge opportunity there now for a platform like Snapfix.
And Paul, I'm aware that there's also a very strong community focus and ethos built into Snapfix.
Yes. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was we always want to provide overwhelming value to our customers, and we also have a very, very long-term view of doing something very meaningful in the homeless community. So we see ourselves as managing some of the most incredible buildings in the world, some of the most incredible infrastructure, and I'm very, very aware that there's lots of people who don't even have a roof on their head. So it's my personal ambition to do something very meaningful in that area. We're going to turn Snapfix into a unicorn. It's going to be a big success story for Ireland, a big success story for Dún Laoghaire, and then we're going to do something very, very meaningful in the homeless community as well.
Paul, if you weren't involved in Snapfix today, what business venture would you have instead?
I grew up on a farm, so I grew up on a farm in County Cork, and I've always been involved in property. So I think I would be involved in some version of property development or managing properties. I love that whole sector, In particular, I love period buildings and maintaining and renovating period buildings. I've done a little bit of that in my past. So yeah, definitely something in property management.
If anyone was listening to this morning's show and they're interested in going off and starting their own software business, what nuggets of advice could you share with them?
Okay, a couple of things. When I started out first, I received a very welcome grant from the Dún Laoghaire Local Enterprise Office, and they were really, really supportive. And I designed what I thought was the original prototype for Snapfix. And then over a couple of weeks after receiving that grant, I actually decided to double down on simplicity, and I got rid of half of the solution. And I actually didn't use half the grant. I gave back half the grant. I just didn't need it. So I just wanted to ruthlessly eliminate what wasn't required. So I built half a prototype, which was more than enough that I needed. So focusing on simplicity is absolutely key. Getting it in front of customers at the earliest possible time is absolutely critical. I'll always be thankful for the team up at Fitzpatrick's Castle in Killiney for being our first beta customer, and they really gravitated to it, and they're very successful customers to this day. Getting in a car or getting on a flight and traveling to meet people is always important. And one of the things that they say in Silicon Valley is you've got to do things that don't scale. You know, of course, today we couldn't possibly fly to every single customer. It just wouldn't make sense. But in the early days, you want to get into a car, get on a flight, because real customer feedback is absolutely invaluable.
Paul, finally this morning, are you building this business with a potential acquisition in mind?
No, we have a very, very long-term view to build a global company with Snapfix. We're thinking in terms of decades in relation to our view. So we're thinking like the guys in Stripe are. You know, they've got such a long-term view in their thinking. We're thinking very, very similarly. There's a big opportunity here. There's a massive global opportunity, not only in the built environment with buildings, but outside of that in relation to other types of task management in professional services or healthcare. So we're building a global platform here, again, to be a big success story for Ireland, and we're going to build it from Ireland.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Paul McCarthy from Snapfix, and I wish Paul every success with his global expansion plans.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast.